Oh man, Nazis ruin everything. Yeah, so I was like, oh, a European trip. These Americans went to Europe in what year was it? 1938. That can't be a problem. Well, there you go. The Nazis showed up. The Germans showed up. So we don't like Nazis here at AV Geeks. We certainly show films that feature them, but boo. All right. Let's well, anyways, I'm Skip. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show, where we watch old 16mm films, and that was some home movie footage. Beautiful color, though. Holy cow. Let's learn about roots of plants with our good friend. Did I write down his name? Why did I write down his name? Where is it? I wrote it down. I totally forgot his name. You know who I'm talking about. I'll have it when I come back. Anyways, it's our good friend from Encyclopedia Britannica and Irpy Films. James Brill, that's who it is. James Brill.
Plants of many kinds grow on land and in the sea wherever conditions are favorable. They cannot exist where it is too cold or too dry. The essential parts of the self-sustaining land plant are leaves, stem, and roots. The leaves are the food factories and breathing organs of the plant. The stem carries food and food elements between the leaves and the root. In such plants as the dandelion, the stem is scarcely noticeable. The root, the unseen part of the plant, does important work. It not only holds the plant in place, but absorbs food elements from the soil. It is necessary to dig deeply to uncover the dandelion root completely. Dandelions, carrots, and many other plants have tap roots such as you see here. A taproot is a large main root growing straight downward and having small side roots. Has a fascicled root. The primary root divides and the branches are enlarged for the storage of plant foods. Fibrous roots occur in all cereals such as corn, oats, wheat, and rye. In the case of rye, the root over one winter, thus giving it an early start the following spring. If a rye plant is dug up and the soil is carefully washed off, we find these fibrous roots. As you see, these are numerous, slender, and nearly the same size throughout, all originating near the same place. Here we shall see how roots grow. Notice that there is a tendency for all main roots to grow downward. Remember that the action in all the following growth scenes is speeded up several thousand times. Spots of ink have been placed on this root at equal distances. By noting which spots spread the most, we can locate the region of most rapid growth by watching the spots separating. As you see, this part is near the tip, while the parts further back grow in length hardly at all. One of the most marvelous features of the root is the root cap, which covers the tip. It protects the delicate growing part which is directly back of it. It never becomes a part of the root proper. Its function is simply that of a shield. The worn-out cells of the root cap become a protective coat for the root tip. As the root penetrates the soil, this jelly covering wears off about as fast as it forms. In this view, there is no wear, so it continues to accumulate. Here in this enlarged view, you may see how a root pushes its way through the soil. The boulder-like objects are in reality only grains of sand. Notice how the cells of the root cap are actually worn off as it pushes the soil particles aside. Roots are very sensitive. If they are exposed to bright light, which is injurious, they will turn and grow away from the light. If a main root is placed in a horizontal position, which is an unnatural one, the root turns downward. All taproots and primary roots show this inclination to grow downward. Roots find rocks no great hindrance to their progress. The copper in a cartridge is a deadly poison to young roots. If a growing root approaches a piece of copper, it seems to sense the poison and turns aside. But if a part of the tip is cut off, the root still grows and plunges head-on into the poison. It is helpless. The poison has done its work, and the root dies. When crowded together, seedling roots grow straight downwards and do not interfere with each other. Some grasses send roots downward to a depth of 5 or 6 feet. The main root usually sends out side shoots back of the growing part. This is the beginning of branched roots such as are found in trees. The older and larger roots are useful chiefly in providing anchorage, while younger and more tender roots absorb water and food materials. In a close-up view, we can see more clearly how roots develop branches. Notice that in back of the growing part are a countless number of tiny root hairs. These never develop into larger branches or roots. The part of the root that has ceased to grow in length still continues to grow in thickness, and it is not until this time that it begins to send out side shoots or branch roots. Under the microscope, we can see how the bud of a secondary root is forming here beneath the surface. In developing, it actually breaks through the outer wall of cells and then continues to grow. A highly magnified view of a root shows that it is composed of cells. This view also shows that the root hairs are really nothing more than projections of surface cells of the root. If we magnify one of these root hairs still more, we can see clearly the throbbing or the flowing of the life substance within the cell wall in this remarkable view. This substance in all plant or animal cells is called protoplasm. These small root hairs are the chief organs of absorption. They take up water and its dissolved minerals from the soil. This drawing shows how the root hairs have pushed their way between the particles of soil and how they absorb the water which the plant needs. The way in which this works can be shown better by an experiment. The end of this glass tube has been covered with a piece of egg skin membrane. The bulb of the tube has been filled with water, to which sugar has been added. The water has also been colored to make it easily visible. After the funnel has been fastened over a glass, pure water is poured into the glass until it rises above the membrane. After a few hours, the sugar solution will begin to rise in the glass tube. You must remember that in this scene and all the growth scenes, the action has been greatly speeded up by time-lapse photography. The water in the glass has passed through the egg skin and rises in the tube. This persistent force is called osmotic pressure. Osmosis is the process by which root hairs take up water and dissolved minerals through the root network to the main roots and on through the stem and branches to the leaves, where they are made into plant foods. The water secured from the roots and the carbon dioxide taken from the air are combined within the leaves to form starch, which may be changed to other plant foods. These are sent all parts of the plant to nourish the living cells. Here, root cells are receiving more sugar than they can use. Therefore, they change this soluble sugar to insoluble starch for future use. Carrots, beets, and other root vegetables are excellent examples of roots that have large amounts of stored starch. In other plants, stored in stems and often in seeds. Now we see the same root cells again, packed with starch grains. This food is stored for the plant's own use, but often it is used by man and animals for their nourishment. But let us see how the plant uses it. Here, a carrot has spent one summer storing food in its root. This remains inactive during the winter, but in the following spring, the plant begins a new growth by sending up stems and leaves which are nourished by the root. It is this second year's growth which will produce seeds. Plants requiring 2 years for their life cycle are called biennials. In this picture, you have had some portions of the story of plant roots. Further experiments, which you can easily conduct, may prove to you that the lowly, unseen plant root has a story as interesting as any in all nature.
James Brill, that's who it was. I don't know, it's like on the tip of my tongue, and I had it written down, and I couldn't find out where I wrote it, and I mean, I should just put it like as a plaque up next to my webcam. James Brill, the voice of ERPI films, which we found out was not someone's name, but it stood for Electric Research Projection Incorporated or something like that. It was basically Western Electric, I think, made them. All right, so behind me, I have a film on the film scanner, and yeah, Mullet Country. Woo! Enjoy.
Please adjust your volume control to the level of my voice.
Catch me if you think you can, you high-booted net-waving fisherman. You know it too, this land is mine. Why else would it thrill you so to feel me tugging on your line? Here I'm free, the shining silver water hanging over me is all the world I need. An inch of ecstasy arise to break the surface, scan the sky. Rise, rise, till I fall again. Back into the silver water, back into my home, back into the place I call Mullet Country.
I'm bleeding enough to catch.
Yeah.
let's go. Okay, drive them in.
And that's gill net fishing in Mullet Country. Mullet Country is multi-million-dollar resort hotels parading along sandy Florida beaches. It's picturesque St. Augustine, where the great ornithologist and painter John Audubon reported schools of mullets so dense they slowed his boat. Mullet Country is the Everglades, that great grassy sea, land of the proud Seminole Indians. The Seminoles taught the early settlers that mullet is a fine Florida food fish. Mullet Country is in truth a world of water, and so a world of fishing and fishermen. A single throw to feed the family and friends. That's a skillful cast net fisherman. Or a lucky one. And it's a lucky sport fisherman who hooks the mighty tarpon in Mullet Country. The mullet has a long and distinguished history, intermingled with the culture of many lands. Tarpon springs and sponge divers are part of the Greek culture that exists today in Mullet Country. Historically, the mullet was an important food fish in the Greek diet. The ancient Romans recognized mullet as a seafood delicacy. The Egyptians, too, cultivated mullet in the overflow deltas of the Nile. In the South Seas, mullet culture is still practiced in fish ponds throughout the islands. Mullet feed mainly on minute plants and animals, and so they usually will not bite at a baited hook. At home in salt or fresh water, they can jump with great vigor and multiply at a fantastic rate.
Sea Queen to spot a plane. Giff, which way they headed?
They're behind you, Skipper. Heading your way. Come on back.
Roger, Giff. Okay, we'll make our set now.
The set is made, closing off the fish. The fishermen haul the net to concentrate the catch. Plenty of ice as they come out of the water. That'll keep their sea fresh flavor. And that's beach seine fishing in Mullet Country. Mullet is processed to be marketed in many forms: iced, frozen, smoked. It is canned under United States government supervision. Variety to suit every taste, and your favorite market should have mullet. Inexpensive, easy to prepare, ask for it. Whether you call them fillets or fillets, oven-fried mullet is delicious, nutritious, and children make no bones about it. Smoked mullet is a real change of taste for a Mullet Country beach party or a backyard cookout. Mullet helps create distinctive, delightfully different hors d'oeuvres for a fashionable gathering.
It doesn't take me quite as much time. It took me 4 months.
Do you have mullet in France?
Oh yes, we do. They come in the Mediterranean, and they are a delicacy. We use them all the time in the bouillabaisse.
Good.
That's
Different.
mullet and avocado.
Mullet and avocado.
Yes.
Very good.
Lisa? Yes, Lisa's a Spanish name. It's a Spanish
I
name.
think it was a canned mullet. I don't know if it was smoked or not, but it was delicious. However they fixed it.
And mullet is found in the most cosmopolitan surroundings, on the menus of fine restaurants. What seafood fancier could resist the superb flavor of mullet almondine? With the increasing popularity of mullet, modern equipment and more efficient fishing methods are being used, such as purse seining. More mullet are landed in Florida than any other state. Florida is truly mullet country.
I've seen the sun on the surface and run deep along the splashing shores of every line. You'll see me there no matter where, my silver body flashing as I rise, catching rays from from the sun. Here I'm free, the shining silver water hanging over me is all the world I need. And in sheer ecstasy I rise to break the surface, scan the sky, rise, rise, till I fall again, back into the silver water, back into my home, back into the place I call Mullet Country. Neon lights flashing bright, shining down while children play on golden sand. You've seen it now, this is my land. Come with me, have fun with me, I'm down here, hugging on your line. Here I'm free, the shining silver water hanging over me is all the world I need. And in sheer ecstasy I rise to break the surface, scan the sky, rise, rise, till I fall again, back into the silver water, back into my home, back into the place I call Mullet Country.
Oh, wow. An actual song. A Mullet Country song. Man. That was awesome. All right. So I spent the weekend with Joe Pickett from Found Footage Festival, and he talked about how he did want to participate with the toe tapping tournament. And we took a year. We didn't compete last year because they were lame, and they did not fulfill their wager until the end of the year. So we have last year's winners, and then I think we should do it again this year. So in April we'll do it. We won't. It'll be probably just one day, and what I'll do is maybe bring the last 4 winners, and then maybe 4 new winners. And so yeah, this will be in April. I don't have the brain space to kind of think about this now. But in the meantime, let's spend 7 days in Salina. Enjoy.
$1,600 miles and 4 days on the road gave the Reverend Jud Wag time to think. And since the road led away from home to a land baked by the burning sun of a Midwestern summer, he thought a great deal about why he was here. What was bringing him to Kansas in August? And what did Kansas mean to him? Jud Wag was accustomed to asking questions. He was a clergyman, and questions were a part of his life. The air he breathed, the road he traveled. But that day, as he drove into Kansas for the first time, the discomfort of doubt and the burden of uncertainty pressed him with the persistence of the August sun. Parish priest, rector of a fine church in a suburban community, and well-liked by his parishioners, Jud Wag was aware of the blessings that were his. And as he drove over the barren and limitless plains that are Kansas, he reviewed again and again the reason for this journey. On the surface, it was simple enough. He had heard that in this vast territory, which the church calls the missionary district of Salina, there was an urgent need for clergymen. And now, at the invitation of the missionary bishop of Salina, Jud was coming to explore with the bishop the possibility of transferring to the district. But that is where it stopped being simple. For as Jud Wag surveyed this land, sensed its dimension, and felt its isolation, he was overwhelmed by still another question. What does this land have for me? And more important, what have I to give this land? And on the final leg of the journey, as he sought the answer in the countryside, what he saw brought little comfort or assurance. Salina, Kansas, is the sea city of the missionary district of Salina. A missionary district is an area of the church which is not self-supporting and which depends largely upon the financial help of the whole church. In such areas, the missionary bishop, as the representative of the whole church, assumes major responsibility for the development of the church's work. And Jud Wag was coming to the office of the bishop to see about a job, a big job, perhaps too big. The Right Reverend Arnold M. Lewis, missionary bishop of Salina, was indeed a man with a mission and a man with a job. The mission? To build and expand the church in the district of Salina. The immediate concern? Finding the clergyman to help him do the job. The bishop came directly to the point. He was looking for a certain kind of man, a type not easily found. His clergy must combine the courage and zeal of the evangelist with the practical qualities needed to build a missionary district into a self-supporting diocese. The bishop did not minimize the problems. A ministry here was a difficult, taxing, often lonely business. There were a great many obstacles to overcome. And the major obstacle, space. 50,000 square miles of it. The western 3/5 of Kansas. And in all this area, only 28 parishes and missions with a total of 16 clergymen to serve them. But the bishop suggested that Jud accompany him on his trips around the district. In this way, he would get to know the area, its problems, and its possibilities at first hand. The tour began on the following morning. Jud was to spend 1 week with the bishop, and on the 7th day, they would decide whether he would join the clergy of the missionary district of Salina. And so it was that Jud Wag began a series of lessons on western Kansas. There was a lot to see, and Bishop Lewis made certain they saw all of it. Their first trip took them through oil country to the south. And here, on land that harbored the energy to drive 1 million cars and power 1,000 ships, Jud Wag began to feel the living pulse of western Kansas. Amid the rolling hills of upland country to the north, Jud Wag began to appreciate the problem of space and the dimensions of the challenge which faced the church. This was a land richly blessed, endowed with the resources which helped make our country great. But in terms of the church's purpose, it was an area that had not begun to fulfill its potential. Part of the reason lay in the very vastness of the territory and in the isolation of the people who lived and worked on the land. With only 16 clergymen to serve 28 parishes and missions, which were scattered over 59 counties and thousands of miles, the outreach of the church was sadly limited. The ministry must be strengthened, churches must be built, and congregations must flourish before this land could be claimed for God. In the southwest corner of the state, on the fabulous plains wherein the story of his country was written, Jud Wag sensed the drive and the vitality that carried a young nation to the shores of a continent. Amid reminders of an heroic past and a beckoning future, he saw once again the promise and the potential of this land. Here was a pioneer heritage and a people who had once responded to the challenge of a lawless and untamed frontier. Here was a land where men of conviction must blaze new trails for the church. On the darkening Kansas plain, Jud Wag sensed the excitement of the challenge and felt the surge of spirit which had carried his church to ever new mission frontiers. And one morning, not far from Salina, at the monument marking the very center of the United States, the things he had seen and felt fell into place and combined in clear and unmistakable form. And many, not all, but many of the questions and doubts Jud Wag had brought with him seemed to dissolve and give way before the clean breeze that swept the Kansas plain. Jud Wag had completed the first course in the series, and the Bishop of Salina, reading the heart and the mind of his pupil, said nothing, but was not unhappy with what he saw. On the following evening, there was a meeting of the officers of the District of Salina. This group of clergy and laity are a bishop's cabinet of advisors and general staff. With Jud Wag observing, Bishop Lewis reviewed the situation of the church in the area. He began with the recent revolution in our country, the massive movements of population from rural areas to towns, and from towns to the great urban centers. He recalled that in the 20 years from 1930 to 1950, about half of our country's working farm population had abandoned rural districts for industrial and urban areas. Whole communities had been depopulated, stripped especially of young adults. And many of these communities, decaying and isolated, could no longer support or maintain a church. Yet the spiritual need of those who remained could not, would not be ignored. In many small villages and towns throughout the district, the story was the same. Overlooked and passed by in the great migration to the cities, these communities were withering and dying. But there was a need here nonetheless, a need for a vital ministry, a need for guidance, a need for a place to grow, a need for a place to go. But the churches, like the communities, abandoned and neglected, needed help, needed the support of people who knew their Christian responsibilities. Now Bishop Lewis turned to the other side of the coin. He spoke about the healthy, bustling communities, prospering oil and wheat centers, flourishing on the Kansas plain. He spoke of towns attracting thousands of new families each year, and cities bursting their municipal seams with the vigor of their growth. But all too often in these thriving communities, the church has failed to keep pace. Facilities can no longer accommodate the town. Church buildings are too small for their congregations. Sunday schools and other parish activities which make for the growing Christian community are hampered by inadequate quarters. But in some of these growing communities, people of conviction were taking steps to meet the situation. Plans were being drawn and foundations laid so that the church would grow and keep pace as the population multiplied. But here again, help was needed to finish the job. There was a third aspect to the development of the church in the district of Salina. In some communities, people of energy and faith, with nothing more than their own resources, had built self-supporting parishes, had constructed the churches and the parish houses that are a testament to faith. And even more inspiring, people of the district were looking beyond the boundaries of their own church communities to other missions at home and abroad. And by their interest and support, were showing the very essence of Christian belief. The bishop now turned to the task at hand. The survey, which was being conducted in cooperation with the National Council's Unit of Research. Here was an opportunity for the people of the district to take a long look at themselves, to measure their achievements and their failures, and most important, to set goals for the future. The survey began with the making of detailed maps, maps showing everything from the location of schools and churches to the homes of communicants. In phase 2 of the year-long survey, clergy and laymen assigned to various aspects of parish activity make extensive reports on their assigned field. In this way, every church-related subject from building and finance to Sunday school curricula are examined and evaluated. Legwork and questionnaires mark the third and final phase of the survey, the Episcopal Census. Canvassers trained in the gathering of vital statistics visit each parish family and explain the use of the questionnaire. The information is recorded, tabulated, and organized for future use. This is the church's way of assessing its precious resources and marshaling its strength for the tasks ahead. This completed the bishop's report, but his week had barely begun. On the following evening, there was a meeting with the trustees of church property and the Committee on District Finance. The topic, funds for a new church. As always, when men concerned with spending the church's money gather in open discussion, there are questions, doubts, and dissents. For Jud Wag, another lesson in the series on Salina. For Bishop Lewis, an exercise in building and finance. Was the property desirable? Could the budget stand the expense? Was the investment sound? And as always, when the business was the Lord's business and the investment His church, budgets had a way of stretching and dissenters a way of mellowing, and God's work was done. That week, there was another evening, warm and companionable, when several clergymen gathered at the bishop's home. They drank Mrs. Lewis's coffee, they relaxed and unwound, compared notes, swapped stories, and maybe learned a few new ones. But underneath the merriment and the laughter, the missionary bishop of Salina remained a man with a mission. And the conversation got around, as it generally did, to the church in the missionary district of Salina. Bishop Lewis spoke about the problem that was uppermost in his mind, the shortage of clergymen in the district and the need for extending the reach of the church throughout the vast territory of the district's 50,000 square miles. He urged his clergy to stretch their ranks, to make their numbers count, to bring their ministry to the people wherever they were, in the oil and wheat fields, in the factories, and on the ranches. And Jud Wag was to learn that the bishop practiced what he preached. In the time that remained of his visit, the area covered by the missionary district of Salina was to become almost as familiar to Jud Wag as the streets surrounding his home. But more than geography, he saw how the church, with limited resources, but with a deep fund of faith, was extending itself, was making a superb effort to meet the needs of the district of Salina. No place was too remote, and no man so far removed as to be beyond the reach of pastoral concern. The men who worked in the oil fields and their families were of special interest to the church, which understood their problems, understood that because they were always on the move, they rarely had time to sink firm roots in a community. When their work here was finished, they would be on their way once more to Texas, perhaps, or Oklahoma, or wherever oil lingered under the ground and men were needed to bring it in. To these men, the Bishop of Salina brought the real wealth of the church's concern. The journey continued, and with each passing mile, it grew richer and more meaningful for Jud Wag. The next stop was at one of the many grain elevators, which, like fluted castles, soar into the Kansas sky. More than 1/5 of the nation's total wheat supply comes from the rich plains of this state. And it is in the huge grain elevators that the golden harvest of the fields is conserved and stored for future use. But for Jud Wag, the real wealth of this experience was neither in the wheat, nor in the land, nor in the great tanks of concrete which rose above. What interested and stimulated him was the Bishop of Salina's profound commitment to a way of life, active evangelism. In the words of the bishop, was more than merely conducting or attending services. It was carrying the gospel of Jesus Christ into all the world, beginning in our own communities. And this he did with a warmth and cheer that gladdened those around him. And the bishop reaped as he sowed, received as he gave. The secret of his strength and the source of his energy were in the people whose lives he saw broadened and enriched by their faith in a God whose love knows no limit. As the journey continued over long stretches of Kansas highway, Jud Wag learned to appreciate the difficulty of maintaining a ministry in a land so immense that families and even communities were virtually lost in space. A clergyman must spend countless hours and gallons of fuel reaching the people of his parish. In the upland country of the cattle ranches, which stretch for thousands of acres, people are especially isolated. The nearest church is often 40 or more miles distant. The church must therefore be brought to the people. The bishop was especially fond of these men who spend the greater part of their lives on the open prairie, herding and caring for cattle. Between this man, who lived close to the earth and under the blue sky, and the bishop, there was a bond of mutual understanding. For each, in his own way, had arrived at a special state of reverence for all that which is granted to man. Each, in his own way, was a steward of God, and each brought to his calling the devotion of dedicated men. In the simple majesty of the evening service, there was a profound sense of peace and reverence. The Lord was in his holy temple, and all the earth kept silence before him. On Sunday, the bishop's day began by conducting services in one of the small mission churches, which does not have a regular priest. For the congregation, the Sunday of the bishop's service is something special. He has come to know and be known by his people, and is indeed chief shepherd of his flock. And for the parents who have long awaited this day, who but their bishop could receive their child into the congregation of Christ's flock? Later in the day, confirmation service at St. Francis Boys' Home, where the Episcopal Church is making a unique effort to reclaim boys who have been in trouble. Confirmation here is a deeply moving occasion. It means that a boy who had gone astray has now chosen to follow Christ and become part of a Christian community. For 4 days each year, Salina, Kansas puts its best foot forward, turns its cares aside, and recaptures its frontier heritage. Everybody loves a parade, and the Bishop of Salina was no exception, especially when the parade is a prelude to the county fair. And for Jud Wag, whose visit was rapidly coming to a close, the festivities were a welcome change of pace, and a fine opportunity to get to know the people of Salina from a different perspective, from a lighter, less serious side. The fair began with a traditional Wild West show, and though it was not a scheduled part of his course on the district of Salina, the Reverend Jud Wag enjoyed it nonetheless. For the Bishop of Salina, this was a day off, and he made the most of it, relaxing in the robust tradition of a land where horses and riding and roping were still a part of the lives of the people he knew and served. These were the crafts with which they lived and earned their living. And for Bishop Lewis, this was more than entertainment, more than just a show. In the courage and skill of horsemen like Johnny Rivers, he saw the preservation of a virile frontier heritage. And this was a legacy he cherished and hoped would never be lost to the American people. The day of the fair was the 6th day of Jud Wag's visit to Salina. The time had flown. The days had been full of colorful and significant events. And now, the time for decision was close at hand. He could delay no longer. And as he walked around the fairgrounds, he reviewed the events of the past week in terms of what he would say to the bishop on the following day. Of one thing he was certain. The previous 6 days had been as rewarding and instructive as any he had ever known. The things he had seen and learned under the bishop's guidance, he would always make use of and treasure. Jud Wag would remember many things about his tour through the district of Salina. He was deeply impressed by the need for extending the outreach of the church. And he would always remember the bishop's warm and genuine interest in the people he served. And this thought kept recurring to Jud as the two clergymen continued their tour of the fairgrounds. They stopped at the platform where 4-H children were washing and currying with loving hands the animals which were to be presented for judging. Months of work and care had gone into the grooming of these calves. And as Jud Wag observed this labor of love and thought about the hopes and dreams of these children, he wondered if he, like the bishop, could be one of these people, could learn to share their hopes and dreams in the same warm and genuine manner. And for the first time since he had come to Salina, he realized how much they had grown in his affection, how much they had touched and won him, even as he was being introduced to the problems of the district. Toward the end of the day, Jud felt the need to be alone and by himself come to a decision. Of the questions and doubts he had brought with him to Kansas, only one now seemed of any importance. What did he, Jud Wag, have to give to this land and to these people? What could he bring to a people whose faith was as real and vital as the soil they worked and the wheat they grew? And Jud Wag asked for guidance, prayed for the wisdom of a sound decision. And before God, he asked for that which would make him worthy of a ministry in the district of Salina. So it was that on the morning of the 7th day of his visit to Salina, Jud Wag lost little time in getting to the bishop's office. His course was clear, his heart unburdened, and his spirit lifted by the decision he had made. Now it was for the bishop to decide if he would have him Jud Wag would cherish the opportunity to serve. For Bishop Lewis, there had been no doubt. With gladness he heard the words, and with joy he welcomed his new clergyman to the district of Salina. In Jud Wag, the bishop saw promise and potential. He saw a sign of the whole church's growing concern and support for missionary areas. And this, he knew, was the key to the future of districts like Salina.
We'll return to the adventures of Jud Wag in Salina after these messages. Excuse me. Doing that vocal fry made me cough. Jud Wag. Jud Wag. Jud Wag. I envision that Jud spelled his first name with 2 D's and his last name with 2 G's. That's just the way it feels. And thanks to ChatGTP for coming up with that logo. I hope that I didn't put somebody out of work making that absurd logo at the last minute. Fascinating. That film would have been shown like right about now, actually. There was I grew up Episcopalian and Lutheran, and so during Lent would be a time that Christians would not only maybe stop eating meat and have fish, but they would also donate to the church. And this is a call to donate for a mission. You know, Jud Wag was a missionary, but it was in the United States, in Salina. And so this would be shown, and they would talk about like the missionary work that they're doing in the United States or in other countries, or, you know, so we have several films that deal with that, and that one was beautiful. Plus Jud Wag. Kevin, thanks for donating via the super thanks button. And you can support us by giving us a thumbs up, by liking us, by subscribing, by doing any number of things. One of the things is commenting, watching, sharing. We have new films we're adding almost every day now to the YouTube channel because the ad revenue is slowly coming back, so thank you for that. You can also go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks. Those are great ways to support us as well. So we will see you tomorrow, Friday. Friday. What will I show? I don't know. Jud Wag. Everybody have a great rest of your day. And Jud Wag.